G'day and welcome to video number 1 of, let's call it the Cobra Jet Chronicles, and it's going to be a video about my beast that I've just recently imported from Canada and everything that I found out about it and why I bought it, why I think they're a really good buy. Especially here in Australia, given that everything in Australia is of this era is exorbitantly priced. If you're not in the market now, well, you probably can't get in unless you're very wealthy. You've got to have bought a car years and years ago to have any chance of having something that people would consider cool nowadays. I'm fortunate I've got a GT as well, an XB, that I brought in 1986 or 87, somewhere around there, and I've had it on and off the road the whole time. It's mainly been off the road. So a little bit about me. So I've just retired. I'm 54, and if you're thinking that's young, yeah, it is. But I spent 27 years in the Defence Force, and physically it's taken its toll. So I was able to get out medically and try and keep myself alive by concentrating on the things that I love, which are things like this. So this was my retirement gift to myself. So why did I go down this route and not spend a significant amount of money on something Australian? Well, I've already got an XB, so you know that's one reason why. Why something American and not something else Australian? Well, I grew up in Reservoir in Melbourne in the 70s. That'd be when my earliest memories are. And my dad was mad into his American cars. He had Cadillacs, Buicks, mainly Buicks, the odd Oldsmobile, the odd Pontiac, the odd Dodge. He had Australian Chrysler by Chryslers, ZF Fairlane, Cortinas, but mainly American stuff. They were his passion. So I grew up with something American in the driveway. He loved the limos, the big cars. He did have a GS Buick 68, I think, a little two-door coupe with a 350 in it from memory, and that was a pretty cool car. GS, I think it was. But by and large, he went for the bigger stuff. But, you know, this is why I love the American stuff, because I grew up with it and just fascinated by them. So, yeah, just retired, a bit physically knocked about, but able to sort of function. So that's why I chose the big American car. And it mainly comes down to economics. If I wanted something like this that was locally made, the only real equivalent of anything like this would be an XA GT coupe, and a good XA GT coupe is going to set you back $250,000 and up for a fully restored car. So this car's fully restored. It's a big block car, so it's 429 C6 9-inch. Disc brake front, drum rear end, so with the exception of the cubic inches on the motor, it's pretty similar to an XA GT coupe. You hear a lot of people who bag American cars, and the quickest people to bag these cars are people that have never driven them or owned them. And they'll say the usual shit. They don't stop and they don't go around corners, and they're super heavy, and they're left-hand drive. It's dangerous. You'll get killed on the highway because you can't overtake, because you've got to go right out into the right-hand lane to see what's coming. You know, it's all horse shit. This is my third left-hand drive car, my second big block car. First was a 1969 A12 Super B 446 pack 4-speed car. It's a 13-second car from the factory, as these were, these Torino Cobras in 1970. So they are perfectly safe to drive, and they're fun to drive, and you get used to being on the wrong side of the car immediately. There is no transition period. It's like riding a bike. So hence that's why I chose one. I just love them. I think they're cool. They kick the shit out of anything we ever made in this country in that era, performance-wise. You'll always have people say, oh, that's horseshit. Well, sure, I wouldn't want to take this thing around Bathurst, but it'd crush a Phase 3 on the streets. It'd crush an XA on the streets. These are high 13-second cars, mid to high 13-second cars back in 1970. You won't find an XY or an XA factory off the dealership floor do that. So they are just absolute kick-ass cars. So that's why I love them. You won't see too many of them. There's, as coincidence would have it, there's literally one 10 minutes away from where I live in Western Brisbane. So I think there's about 4 or 5 or 6 not too far from where I live. So they are around. But, you know, like I found with my Dodge, my Super B, I'll probably go to a car show and this will be the only one there. Which is kind of cool, but it's also a bit sad because it's a good way to meet people owning these cars. And I'd love to meet people that own Torinos or Rancheros or Cyclones or any of those sort of Ford variants and sub-variants from 1970, 69, 70, 71. So hopefully we'll see more cars. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's why I bought this thing. It's was restored in 2016, and I'm finding out more about this car as the days go by because I'm trawling Facebook and pressing people's belly buttons for info. And it was restored in 2016 by a gentleman in Tennessee, I think it is, and was rotisserie restored from the ground up. The motor's been rebuilt, so I think it's no longer stock. It doesn't sound stock. And I think the auto was also done. It might have a store converter in it as well. So new paint, new everything. They did the underside as well. It's just, it's almost flawless. So it's essentially a brand new car. And look, if you wanted an XA, which like I said is the closest equivalent to this thing, you know, if this was an XA, you're looking at 300,000 plus. And this cost me, well, owes me $100,000 Australian, which is big money for a Torino Cobra. I paid it right at the, the upper end of the market for one of these. But like I said, in relation to the Australian stuff, like it's a coupe, although the Americans called it a sports roof. Didn't call it a hardtop, called it a sports roof. The lines are so similar to the XA coupe that it's not funny, and it's obvious where the XA got its looks from. It came from this. And you can have people say that the XA was designed on the back of a Serviette. Yeah, sure, but it was designed by, I think, co-designed by an Australian and an American, and you can, as long as my ass points to the ground, you can be guaranteed that they were basing it on what they knew the 1970 Torino sports roof was going to look like, because the lines are just unmistakable. In relation to size, like I said, people say these things are huge, they're boats. This car is actually narrower than an XA coupe. It's only a few inches longer, and I think the difference in height is negligible. I think there's maybe 1 inch either way in height. So size wise, it's not a barge, it's the same, for all intents and purposes, it's the same size as an XA coupe. It's just got a fair bit more horsepower. These are 370 to 375 indicated horsepower in the 1970 from the factory. They lied, of course. The big three, Ford, Chev and Chrysler, all lied about the horsepower outputs of their cars. because insurance premiums were based on how much power your car had, so you'd pay more for your insurance if you had a big horsepower car, so they downplayed the horsepower. So this was it is a genuine Cobra, so it would have had 370 horsepower. It's probably over 400 now. Super Cobra jets with the drag pack, the taller gears, 4-bolt mains, the Holly carb, they had 375, and that's what I believe this motor's been rebuilt to, Super Cobra jet specs. It's got a Holly on it, and that's about all I know. From one gentleman in America who's been really kind. He knows the car. He knew it when it was, I think, when it was being restored, and before, I think. He's offered me up a little bit more information. It's got a stroker crank in it, and that's all I know at this point. So it's got extractors, twin 3-inch exhaust, sounds as tough as all get out, which we'll eventually get to start it in a future video. But at the moment I'm just feeling my way around the car and just finding out where things are, how things work. Still not registered. It's going for its ADR compliance check tomorrow, so I'll be on the highway in western suburbs of Brisbane and taking my life in my own hands with all the idiots on the road. I've taken the precaution of fitting a dash cam, front and rear dash cam. I don't trust anyone on the road, and as you know, the road's full of dickheads. People just want to try and kill you. So we'll see how we go. Maybe video 2 will be the results of all that. One of the other reasons I wanted to sort of chronicle this whole story is in regards to what you can buy for your local car, like an XB or XA, that you could potentially source from the States, because their stuff's generally cheaper to get, and a lot of it will fit on our cars. I know the disc brake proportioning valves from around 1969-70 American stuff are the same as GT proportioning valves. I think the proportioning valve on this car is exactly the same as the one on my GT, so they're probably a lot cheaper. I've seen vacuum canisters over there are the same as vacuum canisters on the early XBs, the ones with air. So just it might pay, if you've got one of these Falcons, one of our Falcons, an XA, XB, and you are looking for parts that are hard to find, don't discount what was made in America. But as I make videos and I find this stuff, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So essentially, yeah, that's where it is. It sits right now. I've had it out a couple of times, just get new tyres put on it. Never trust the tyres that they come with from overseas. You don't know what they've been doing, where they've been. So I always just throw, well, I do now, throw brand new tyres on it regardless of how good they look. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There it is, 429 cubic inches, and you see the engine bay's been thoroughly detailed as it would have looked in 1970. Very sweet car. I had to, as part of the Australian Design Rules compliance, you get assigned a VIN number from the Australian government, the Department of Infrastructure. It's got to be a 17-digit VIN number, and the VIN number on this car is, I think, 11 digits or something like that. And what they do is they just throw a whole series of letters and numbers on the front of your VIN, on the car's actual VIN number, to make it 17, so it can be, you can have an Australian VIN number. It's kind of superfluous. I know it's all to stop rebirthing and, you know, cars being stolen and turned into something else, and, well, who's going to steal this and turn this into something else? I think it's going to be pretty obvious if someone steals this car and a year later another one turns up in a different colour. So anyway, they make you put a VIN tag, and I've just made my own, and that's the beauty of it. You can make your own, and it's in there. You won't be able to read it, but just a little aluminium piece of steel. I punch some letters and numbers in to correspond with the VIN number that it's been given, and thrown that on there. It'll get one of those ridiculous Queensland modification plates tomorrow, which again are a horse's ass because they're purple or blue or whatever. They're way oversized, and that's got to go by law. It's got to go on the front or rear firewall. The good thing about that is the rear firewall can be in the boot, so that's where it's going to go. And I've run it past the engineer who's doing the inspection, and he's happy with that. He's the one that said you can put it in the boot. So it's going to go in the boot underneath the floor mat. It's got to be permanently affixed, but that mechanism to permanently affix it can be glue, apparently. So that's probably what I'll go for. So when it passes all that ADR compliance, I then have to take it to Queensland Transport, where they'll inspect the paperwork that I'll now have. They'll come and look at the car, make sure it's got its purple modification plate on it, and they'll also check that it's got a VIN tag, a VIN plate on it, which it will now have. A few of the things I had to do to get the car to comply with Australian design rules were seatbelts. So the Torino in 1970 had a two-piece seatbelt. So you had a lap belt down here. Apologies for the light. A lap belt down here that obviously went across your lap, and then a separate seatbelt entirely ran along the top of the roof line. You would have seen them on this sort of era American cars. You can get away with that, but I actually had a spare 3-point modern ADR compliant seatbelt setup, so I've thrown it in this car, and also had to change the headlights because our high beams, when you dip your high beams away from oncoming traffic in the United States, you'd be dipping it towards oncoming traffic here in Australia. So I had to get Australian headlights for this thing, and they're the same as early 70s Falcons, Fairlanes, 5.5 or 5 3/4 inch headlights. So they were all done. They were all pretty easy to do. No Cobra badge in the middle of a 1970 model. They only had the Cobra badge in 1971. So yeah, there it is. The colour is grabber green. It was originally pastel blue, which I've seen cars that are pastel blue and they look like a dirty white. Still would have been cool to have it in the original colour, but this is by far one of the most popular colours for Torinos that I've seen. You do see the odd Mustang in this colour as well. So yeah, there we are. That's video number 1. And what I'll do in future videos, I'll just fill you in on what I found out about the car, how it runs. Have I made a mistake getting another American car? Is it a pile of shit? Is it an ass kicker? What I've found that is the same as our locally built stuff, parts wise, which should be interesting because I reckon there'll be a fair bit. And the various trials and tribulations I have with the car, and it comes with any car of this era. And what I'll probably do as time goes on is we might morph this whole video series into restoring the XB. But we'll see how we go. One day I'll get a photo of them side by side, but at the moment the Falcon's looking pretty sad and sorry down there. I don't have anywhere near enough lights in my shed yet, but she's got a ways to go. But it would be good to get them both running, sitting side by side in the driveway. Yeah. Alright, so yeah, that's it. That's why I bought this American thing. Like I said, I love them. I think they're just the coolest thing since sliced bread, and all the horror stories you hear about American cars, they're just not true. There's always going to be exceptions, but by and large, they're great cars to drive. And I would encourage anyone who is thinking of doing something similar, they're not really sure what kind of car they want. Maybe they're like me, they're about to retire or have retired. They've got a pocket full of money and they've always wanted a coupe, Australian coupe, and they realise now can't afford it, or if I do buy one, it's going to be a basket case. It's going to be a full resto, and that's 5 or 10 years of your life. Because if you're really cashed up enough to knock over a resto in 12 months, then you just buy one restored, wouldn't you? So if you're looking at something really cool and your budget's about 100 grand, I know it's still a lot of money for a lot of people. I would not discount something American. A Mustang, Torino, even go down the Mopar line, Dodge Challenger, although they're getting up there now. Chargers, they're also getting a bit too much money. But if you've got 100 grand and you want something that is basically in so many ways the same as our locally made Falcon hardtops, then Torino Cobra is the car for you, and perhaps even a GT. And that's my wife. I'm in the middle of my video. It's dog walking time. Yeah, these come in GT version as well, 351s. You can get them with 302s as well, I think. Maybe that was in 71, I'm not sure. So, and even the 429s come in 3 different variants: the Super Cobra Jet, the Cobra Jet, and the other one that's name escapes me, which is another 5 horsepower, also lower than a Cobra. So big block options are there, 351s options are there. The GTs are generally more refined, they've got nicer options, and like they've got a full tail light like our Landos have. It goes right across the back of the car, looks pretty cool. These have a honeycomb kind of finish like our coupes. Power windows, and you can get hideaway headlights on these things as well, that came as an option. So there's plenty of cars available in the States. I've seen, if you want a project car, I've seen Cobras and GT Torinos that are 15, 20 grand, and they're not basket cases. So if you're on a real budget and you want something unusual and you don't want to spend 100 grand on a finished car, but you want a coupe, look at the States. They've got it. They'll have something. And get on the forums for these cars, start to talk to people, and you'll make friends, and people will tell you all about it, and you'll find out about these cars. And it's definitely something you should consider if you are not really locked into must have an XA coupe, must have an XB coupe, if you are a bit flexible and you just want something awesome, then yeah, do yourself a favour and get a Torino or similar Mustang. Mustangs are kind of like arseholes though, everyone's got one. So yeah, there you go. If you want to hit me up for any info, sure, leave a comment. Feel free to subscribe. I won't know where to point because I really don't do a lot of this stuff. I'm not all that serious about it anyway. And I'll give you my honest opinion on what I think. And if you think, if you totally disagree with me, feel free, comment away. I don't care. I don't think our local coupes are pieces of shit. I owned an XB coupe for 13 or so years. Had an XB GS coupe. Did everything in that car. Loved it. Yellow blaze, parchment interior, 302. And I'd love to have it again, but if I found that car, I could not afford it, even before buying this. So, and now I've got a brand new car, big block. So I think that speaks volumes. But our cars are certainly, they're special, for sure. But they just don't compare to this big American stuff. This stuff is next level. Like, they built cars for Joe Public to buy in some backwater town in the middle of nowhere, USA, for the sole purpose of just ruling the streets of that little town and dominating and street racing and going to the drags. That's all they were selling cars for. We didn't have that culture over here. We were selling cars based on how they performed at Bathurst, and then we took them out on the streets of wherever we lived, and we didn't drive them at all like they get driven in Bathurst. So the Americans had the right idea. It was all about punching these cars fast off the start line and kicking the shit out of your mate in his Chev beside you. So if that's popping your cork, this is the car for you. Talk to you in episode 2. See ya.